Welcome to the Practicing Drummer podcast. In this episode, I have a conversation with Kai Craig from May of 2026. Kai is a drummer from the UK who first caught my attention through a series of studio clips and an interview he did with Greg Hutchinson, who has been his teacher, mentor, and then even produced Kai's album, A Time Once Forgotten. As soon as I heard Kai, I knew I wanted to have him on the show. I should mention that we recorded another interview a few months ago that never got released. We ended up talking for almost 3 hours that time and both decided that we should try to tighten it up a bit. Even with that in mind, we go almost 2 hours this time, but I didn't want to cut anything because there's a lot of good stuff here. Kai's not only a fantastic player, but he's very insightful, and I think you'll get a lot from this conversation. As always, I'll link to everything in the show notes and on the blog at practicingdrummer.com. And with that, let's get right into it with Kai Craig. All right, hey Kai, thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, pleasure.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to you because, well, your album came out almost a year ago now, I think August, and I've been a huge fan since. I know that I saw a bit of you on social media before that, but it really wasn't until the album came out, and I think that video with Hutch, where Hutch interviewed you.
Yeah. Right.
And, you know, I just first wanted to tell you just how great your album is, and it's just so impressive.
Man,
because you're
thank
still,
you so much.
Yeah, you're still pretty young too, and to have such a mature sound and such an incredible document at your age is a wonderful thing.
That means a lot. Yeah, wow, thank you. Yeah, I mean, Hutch has been a large part of that, so I'm glad that if that's the way that this brought us together, that's very, very cool, because he's done that. A lot of my friends people that I now call friends, I've met through Hutch, and people I play with and stuff. So he's been sort of a blessing in a lot of ways to my life over the last sort of 5-6 years since I sort of met him. So that's very, very cool, and I appreciate that a lot.
And how did it come to be that he produced your album?
Well, I mean, it was pretty informal. I mean, I said to you in the past, and like a lot of people know, I was studying with him,
right?
For the large part of the COVID pandemic, doing lessons, and it started, once a month or so, and then it was more frequent, and gradually over time, the lessons sort of filtered out, and we just sort of became sort of friends. That I'd call him, he'd call me, we'd share news and talk about stuff that's going on, and personal stuff, family stuff, life stuff. Where I was moving to New York and all of that stuff. Like he's been a friend throughout. So when it came time to sort of think about a project that I wanted to, to put my name to, there was kind of no other that knew me as well as he did that I would want to involve in it. So I sort of just asked him. I don't think I even asked him if he would want to produce it. I think I just asked if he would be up for coming just to be around when we were doing it. And I think he'd at that point just finished his project, which was the more produced like hip hop stuff that he released a couple of years back. And so he was kind of trying to just sort of dabble a bit in producing, I'd say. And so he was like, yeah, I'm just down to come and hang out. We talked about the project for probably best part of a year. I was talking about tunes that I was thinking of and people that I was going to call and studio where it was going to be and the drums and everything. And I'd gotten in with Sona drums, and so we were talking about very specific stuff. And I was with Paiste Cymbals. He was also still with Paiste as well at that point. And so we'd really talked just over a very long period of time about every detail. And by the time it came time to record, it was very natural. It was just like having a best friend there. But also at the same time, it's Gregory Hutchinson. It's like I look through into the booth and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's the guy that I've been listening to since I was born, So
yeah, incredible.
It's pretty cool. It's one of the biggest honors and one of the best sort of highlights, I'd say, up until this point in my life. So
how did you decide that it was time to put out an album, and what was your motivation with that?
I think it was actually the owner and the head of the studio that we did it at. We did the recording session at. I'd recorded there the year before, January of 2023, with Sean Payne, who's on my record.
Oh, right, okay.
And so we made his record at the same studio, Riverside Studios in Cologne, Germany, and we recorded there, and Ralph Kemper, who runs the studio there, he'd said to me, just if you ever think about doing a project, we'll help you make an album. Just sort of loosely, again, very informal. I was never really aiming to make an album, because as a drummer, it's not really, I'd say we're usually sidemen. And so it was kind of just gradually that thought was there, it was floating, and I eventually sort of settled on the idea, actually, that's not the worst idea. I would quite like to do a project. And so I started brainstorming, started thinking about, okay, if I do an album, what would I put on it? I'm not really a composer. I learned, basics of composition, and I wrote with Sean's help the tune Dealin' on the record. But I just wanted to document music that at that point in my life, that point in my development, was not really what I get the chance to play as a sideman yet.
Yeah.
So I wanted to pay my respects and pay tribute to Michael Brecker, Kenny Kirkland, Wayne Shorter, John Taylor, as well as a whole host of other people that are still with us, like Tane and Hutch and K-Wash and all my mentors and Bill Stewart and people that I've gotten to know. It became my way of kind of having a project where I can really do a tribute record in the most unconventional way, which is like each track I'm thinking specifically kind of a person, whether it's a composer or a person that was on the original recording, and a drummer that I'm paying tribute to. So eventually it sort of materialized over time. And yeah, I'm glad I did it, because it's I wouldn't have changed anything about how it happened. So
yeah, well, the tune selection is incredible, and the sequencing as well is just marvelous. There are some drummer albums you listen to, and they're very impressive and they're fun to listen to for a time or two. But your album, I keep putting on. I keep coming back to as just an album to listen to and to learn from. It's so wonderful. I have a couple of specific questions about tunes here. I guess the biggest surprise to me was there's the tune Midnight Silence, which is kind of a beautiful, slow tune, and it gets into this really nice rolling thing.
Yeah.
And at the end, when I thought the tune was going to end, but it sort of comes out with a nice, beautiful, blossoming drum solo. And I'm curious if you can talk about that. Was that intentional and sort of pre-planned, or did it happen in the moment?
It was planned. Yeah. Basically, I would say a large part of the record, I more or less knew exactly how I wanted it to be. It was very preconceived if I can say preconceived in a loose way. I didn't really prepare stuff, so to speak, but I knew exactly the order of things and such. And on the original recording of that, which is on Kenny Kirkland's record, I don't know if you've heard that record, but it goes from Midnight Silence into Stygian Faith. And there's a link, and it's a Tane solo called El Rey.
Oh, yeah.
Initially, I wanted to link up two tunes with a drum solo. So I knew that I was going to play a drum solo to link up two songs on the record, and it made the most sense to go from Midnight Silence into something else.
Oh, sure.
However, even though I wanted to have a drum solo there, I ended up also recording a drum solo separately, which I called The Chieftain, which is my tribute to Tane, to Jeff Tane, the Chieftain. I still liked what was at the end of Midnight Silence, and I still made a quote of the ending, the sort of four chords that end the song on the cymbals. I still wanted to have it in there. So that was a conscious thing. It was just not the way I'd planned it. So
and speaking of the solo, Chieftain, we talked before, and you mentioned that Hutch was sort of giving you real-time sort of inspiration or prodding during that solo recording. Can you talk about that and what that was like?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think the hardest thing in the world is someone says, do a drum solo.
Yeah.
Like, how do I, what the hell do I play? I knew, I mean, obviously it's no trouble just to sit down and freestyle something, but like under the pressure of recording, under the pressure of microphones, and also like whilst it's a drum record, I didn't really want to be self-indulgent. I didn't really want to, be so me about it. It was kind of, I was trying to serve all the other musicians. I was, I wanted to do a drum record from a musical standpoint, which is not chopping out. It's not just blowing chops over everything. It was, I'm trying to show the drums how in different musical settings, the drums can shape things. And so the last thing to record on the end of that day was the drum solo. And so we tried it a few times, and I was sort of 75% there, but I was not really sold on what I was playing. And so Hutch gets on the talkback mic in the booth and he just starts saying the names of drummers and he starts saying different stuff to try and just, I think it was to get me out of my own head more than anything. Yeah, we tried turning the lights down. We tried everything to just try and capture things as selflessly as possible. And actually, fun fact was that we recorded it on the centennial birthday of Max Roach, and he's obviously one of my big heroes. So I was trying as hard as I could not to create a drum composition along the lines of, I don't know, Big Sid or Drums Unlimited or Drum Also Waltzes or anything like that. I wanted it still to be me, but that was also overbearing. That was coming down. So Hutch was sort of naming, Al Foster, Elvin Jones, Tony Williams. He was just naming different drummers and
in your ears as you were playing.
In my ears, yeah. I did a couple of takes without headphones. And then he was like, "Put your headphones on." So I put it on, and he was like, "Okay, go." And then he's done his own record, which just at the time we were recording this has since come out, and there's a couple of solos on there where he's like saying drummers' names, and that was exactly how it was. That was exactly how it was.
Oh, funny. Yeah. Now that you say that, I remember hearing that on his record. Yeah.
Yeah, and it cracks me up because I think back to the recording, and the first time we tried it, I just started laughing because he was also doing it in his own characteristic way, and I had to sort of just forget that that's him being funny for a sec. But yeah, we managed to get it, and I'm happy we did. I'm happy with it. It's a document of where I was at that day. So.
Yeah, beautiful. One thing I want to make sure I touch on before I forget, I read an interview that you did on the Four on the Floor blog with John McCaslin.
Yep.
And he's great.
Fantastic. Yeah, such a great blog.
And you mentioned that in preparation for the recording, you were practicing up to 8 hours a day. And I'm curious, and I know just from our talking over the last month that you're a dedicated and disciplined practicer, but I'm curious, leading up to the recording session, what were you chasing with such heavy practice? Because, obviously this isn't a music where you kind of pre-plan and memorize parts and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So what was on your mind?
I mean, largely it was just being prepared for anything to happen, I think. So, making sure rhythmically, polyrhythmically, I'm grounded if anything happens. Because, I mean, all the guys on the record, they're all fantastic in their own right. And I'll give them a quick shout out. So, I mean, Sean Payne on alto saxophone and James Copus on trumpet and Rainer Berm on piano. And my rhythm section partner in crime, Jero Portal on bass.
Yeah.
And they're all so great. And there's something daunting about, being with such great musicians where you want to be able to just go with any which direction that the music goes. So large part was just preparing possibilities, almost like if you practice a game of chess, like you want to be able to go with any different move. Like if the music goes this way, I'm going to go there. And if I also want to lead the music in a certain way, being prepared to do that too. So I've always been a big practicer, but the time that I was preparing for the recording, which happened in January, my mum was visiting New York for the first time to come and see me.
Oh,
and
cool.
So we were doing touristy stuff through the days, and so I was having to structure my time so that I was still preparing ahead of the recording. Because I've always got a lot of things on my to-do list that I want to get better at. I'm pretty restless with wanting to improve and just be the best I can in any situation, but with especially something that I'm going to put my name to and release into the world, I just wanted it to be the highest standard that I could play at that point. And so, I remember my mum and we'd meet up at sort of 10:30 in the morning. And so I was waking up at like 4:30 or 5, and then I'd go and practice from 6 until 10.
Oh, wow.
And then we'd do touristy stuff. We'd go and see the World Trade Center, and we'd go see the Empire State and all of that stuff, and food and everything, showing her around, because that was fresh to me at that point. I'd only been in New York 6 months, so I wanted to show her around too. But I also had this big thing in my calendar approaching over Christmas in the beginning of the new year. So I was doing 6 until 10, and then I was doing 8 p.m. until midnight. So I wasn't sleeping a lot, but I was just every single day just trying to chase a little more. And something that I not a lot of people know, but I was struggling with a pretty bad autoimmune condition at that time, and my whole life was just controlled by this condition that I had, is psoriasis. So, it's a skin condition, and every day I was having to watch my diet. I was having to, so not sleeping a lot is pretty bad for that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Stress causes it to get worse. So it was in a pretty bad place at the time of that. And thankfully, since that, I've touch wood, sort of beaten that, and I'm better, and I'm free of it.
Oh,
But
that's good to hear.
battling that and all of this other stuff, and playing gigs and teaching and everything that I was doing, it was definitely a busy preparation period.
Well, you should be very proud of the album, and I'm so glad that that period of your life is documented.
Me too. Me too.
So you mentioned that your mom was visiting New York
Yeah.
for the first time, and to me, you have an accent. You're from the
Yes.
UK.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering now if we can go back and talk about your formative years as a drummer. Did you grow up in London or countryside, or what was it like for you?
I was born in Brighton originally on the coast, and early in my life we moved to Spain. We moved to the south of Spain because it was at a time pre-Brexit where you could kind of do what you want. And
Oh, yeah,
so my
yeah.
parents, they just made a decision, we were gonna live in Spain. And so we moved to Spain, and the first few years of my life I was living in Spain. I did Spanish school for like 2 or 3 years. And yeah, my dad is a drummer and great drum teacher. And
Oh, cool.
all along, I mean, music was around the house, a huge CD collection and everything. I mean, it was kind of like just the best of the best. There was everything from Blakey to Cannonball to Miles to Coltrane. It was just everything. And then a whole other flip side was Foo Fighters and Queens of the Stone Age and Fishbone, and then also classical music. My grandparents are classical musicians professionally, so I've had music around basically all along. Yeah, it was through my dad basically being a drummer and drum teacher that there were drums around the house and all the drum records. So
Yeah.
I very quickly gravitated towards wanting to play drums at an early age.
So in addition to listening, did he play jazz too?
Totally. I mean, he played jazz. He did, I think his degree that he did back in the day, he studied jazz and played for a very long time. And when he was teaching me, it was less down that route and more down just how to really play, snare drum technique and coordination stuff. And since a very early age, that was, I mean, basically at 2 years old, that was my start, my humble beginning, as they say. I got started with him, and at 6 years old, after we'd moved back actually to the southwest of the UK, that was when I started formally, I would say, studying
Oh,
the
okay.
drums
Okay.
with my dad. So
Did you have other musicians around that you were playing with, or were you pretty
not
isolated?
really, honestly. Yeah, not really at all. I mean, where we moved to, Exeter, which is in the southwest of the UK, it's kind of the end of nowhere. It's like nothing really down there as a music scene.
Okay.
And it's like 3.5 hours from London, which I would say is probably the biggest music scene, or I'd probably say the most saturated music scene in England. And yeah, there was nobody really to play with, so it wasn't really a thing for me early on. It was me and records and myself. And I mean, I was playing from an early age. I was doing school productions, playing in shows and doing bands at school and all of that stuff. But in the sense of like playing jazz, absolutely nothing until way later.
So you mentioned Foo Fighters and Queens of the Stone Age, and
Yeah.
okay, so that makes some sense to me, because I don't even know how I found it, but I found an old video of you on YouTube of a drums competition, and it was definitely more rock and fusion based too. So
Totally.
who were your influences then? Who were you trying to be like in those teen years?
I mean, yeah, it largely all came from my dad. I mean, he loved Vinny and Wackel and Steve Gadd
Okay.
and yeah, they were really, to me, the kind of big influences. So I would listen to all the stuff like Chick Corea, Leprechaun, and Night Sprite, and all of those sort of fusion records. And Brecker Brothers was a big one, like Smoking in the Pit. There's a song on that called Not Ethiopia. And there's a great Steve Gadd solo that I sort of wrote out very meticulously at an early age and figured out all of that stuff. And it was later that I connected the dots that what he was playing was from Max Roach. You know, he was playing bebop stuff, but just on, you know, taped up drums and dry cymbals. So I connected the dots later, but that was just the sound that inspired me at that point. I was really into fusion and funk and soul drumming and all of that sort of stuff. So
that's interesting. You know, because I have a note here about Sean Payne's album.
Yes.
You were soloing over a vamp on a tune called Night Owl. And just number one, I just wanted to say that you sound excellent over that, because that's a tricky tempo to play on, and then to play on a vamp too. But a lot of the language in that solo reminded me of Weckl. So it's not surprising to hear that you went through a sort of fusion phase.
Yeah, I mean, when I was young, I mean, I would say all along I've been inspired, you know, whether it's been fusion or jazz or rock or whatever. I just like great drumming. Like, I've just loved great drummers.
Yeah.
And I don't really care if they play jazz or whatever. Like, I love Ronald Bruner, and I love Mike Mitchell, and I love Chris Dave, and I love Dustin Tyson, and I love all of those guys because they are great at the drums. I don't care that whether they play swing or not. That's just what I personally gravitate towards now. But I'd say when I was sort of coming up, like I wanted to be in Foo Fighters, I wanted to be in Queens of the Stone Age, and I learned every CD of the Foo Fighters, note for note, everything that Taylor Hawkins was playing, everything that Dave Grohl played with Queens of the Stone Age, all of those solos, you know, that he played. And I would say I can't get away from that being in my DNA now, even though now I don't play anything like that. It's, of course, everything is, you know, it's accumulative through our lives, you know?
When did you get more serious about jazz and making that your primary focus?
I think it was probably 2015 or 2016. So it was, you know, for us in the UK as secondary school, we have sixth form, which is, you know, end of the last 2 years of high school here in America. And at that point, I did a summer school in the UK called the National Youth Jazz Collective. And it was about a week long, I think, in the UK. And I remember going there, and that's where I met Sean, and it's where I met a lot of the people that I would later go on to study with in London, at the Royal Academy of Music, where I did my undergraduate degree. And that was, in a lot of ways, that was the first time that I'd played jazz with people, you know, like until that point, I'd been playing along with, you know, with records and Oscar Peterson and Ahmad Jamal and Miles Davis and Cannonball Adderley, like just learning from records. But anybody who tries to play jazz with people for the first time, it's a very humbling experience. So
yeah.
I'm proud to say I sucked, and I'm proud to say that was what sort of sparked a curiosity to want to get better. So even though technically my dad had prepared me very well on the drums, like my hands always, like when I look back, my hands always looked good. But the content of what I was playing, I mean, jazz is a thing that you never complete. It's like accumulative over, you know, the course of your life. You learn bit by bit over a very long period of time, the history of it, the influential people. So that was the thing that sort of kicked it off. And whilst that was only a week long, seeing people like Sean and other people like that who were already so great at playing it, even just for a teenage sort of years, it was like, wow, I really need to go and get better at this. So I went home, I went back to the drawing board, and sort of until the next year when I did it again, just kept practicing. And at the same time, I was still very obsessed with fusion drumming and backbeat stuff. And so I wasn't really fully immersed until I prepared to want to go and do a degree in sort of jazz studies and performance and stuff. So it was probably, that was the catalyst that sort of spurred me on. But it was sort of 2017, 2018, when I'm sort of nearing college, you know, an American university, whatever years, that it really, that was me sort of hooked, I'd say. Even though I'd all along been listening to records with, you know, Blakey and stuff. So
when you had that experience playing with people, and as you said, you know, you felt like you sucked. Did that
Oh, I
change?
did. I didn't feel like it. I did.
did,
I was terrible.
did that change how you ended up practicing or approaching your listening habits and getting closer to being more musical versus technical?
Yeah, I think it was. It was definitely a bit of that, and it was definitely just that I needed to know more about how things related. Like I needed to not just know how the drums work. Like I needed to know how it relates to the bass and how this, what I'm comping is relating to everything else. And even though I'd heard it on a record, doing it is a very different thing that takes a lot of practice and a lot of failing. You need to make your mistakes so that you know what not to do. I think I think it's rare that someone just comes out perfect immediately into a playing situation and everything's there. Like
Yeah.
everybody makes a mistake and then you listen back or something feels off about it and you just go and refine, and it's a constant adding and refining thing that happens through the course of learning how to get to an acceptable level of playing. So I'd say I definitely, those first few years, like it took me a little time to really figure out how to relate what I was doing to other people. But once I sort of figured out, and I mean, also, I got to take lessons with people on that summer school. And when I got to academy eventually, I would have people that really were feeding just information to me constantly. And that's kind of where I really got hooked on practicing and trying to get better. And I just wouldn't stop. Like I would be the first one into school at 7 a.m. and I'd be the last one out at 11 most days on a, constant sort of drip of espresso and protein bars and whatever. I was, that was a very sort of fruitious few years for me learning. But yeah, I think I through learning how things relate. Then when I went back to play with records, I started hearing things differently, hearing, okay, that's why that happened. A lot of it is not just the what, it's the how, like how things relate, how things lead to other things happening within the music. And to me, I was sort of very obsessed with people like Philly Joe Jones and Max Roach and Art Blakey and Arthur Taylor, Lewis Hayes, Vernel Fournier. A lot of those people were sort of foundational inspirations when I was learning, because to me, they all do so well in every playing situation in shaping and influencing the direction of the music and supporting ultimately, which is what we as drummers do, is we support. And how to do that is the thing that takes quite a long time to learn, I think. So I'd say that initial period where I was learning was where that was what sort of led me down the path. But yeah, by that point, I'd sort of figured out, okay, I need to work on how my ride cymbal is, how to come out of the trade clearly, like not just playing all of the stuff that I think is hip. Like it doesn't matter if nobody comes in right, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you kind of just, it's a constant, going back to the drawing board after playing with people every time in those formative years, and still, going back and figuring out how you can do things better.
As you were getting so much more into playing jazz and studying the tradition, was there anything that you had to unlearn or change about your playing that had sort of been ingrained through the heavier rock playing and fusion stuff? I mean, obviously there's a touch difference and...
Yeah, that's the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, touch, dynamics, fitting within an ensemble acoustically. Bear in mind a lot of those fusion records are very high budget studio recordings, and a lot of the stuff that Gad and Weckel and Vinny are doing on Yamaha 9000 drums and really bright Zildjian cymbals, you just can't get away with that with people in a room in this day and age.
Yeah.
So I really had to reconsider a lot of the gear that I was using, the cymbals, the sticks, refining the technique. So even though I had great hands, I could play fast and I could play very rudiments and everything like that was very ingrained already. I needed to kind of just focus on forgetting that and just playing the right dynamic for whatever group I was playing in. And I would say rather than unlearn, I had to learn a lot about orchestrating, setting up a band, all those kind of things, So yeah, it was definitely as eye-opening when you try and play with people after you've been playing along to like Night Sprite or all of those like fusion tunes. Or I'm really into the Dave Weckel Contemporary Drummer +1 recordings.
And that's great. Yeah,
you're not thinking about. I mean, at least for me, when I'm like 12 or 13 and I'm playing along to those things, and I'm not thinking about my dynamics. I'm just like trying to play as fast as I can or whatever the hell,
Right, right.
I really needed to mature a lot by the time I'd come to playing with people. But I'm glad it happened the way it did, that I got to do that later on.
Uh-huh.
I'd already experienced the free curiosity of just playing along to whatever I wanted to,
Yeah.
playing whatever rhythms I wanted to freely myself. Because, then by the time I came to people, I already had worked a lot of stuff out actually. And it was just actually a big refinement that was happening and sort of just changing the language around of what I was playing, I'd say.
Before we stray too far away from your education, and we don't have to spend a ton of
Yeah.
time on this, I'm curious what drew you to the Royal Academy in London. Were there teachers there you wanted to study with, or was it just about getting to London so you could be on the scene?
I mean, largely it was just being in London, I would say. But I also at that time, I think, I don't know if it's still like this, but I'd say that was definitely the premier sort of jazz course at that time in the UK to go to. So I just had my sights really set on going there, I'd say.
Who did you study with while you were there?
I got to study with Martin France, who sadly we lost last year. He was a very important teacher of mine. And played with John Taylor, who obviously is a big part of why I chose to record that song, was because he'd shown me a lot of the recordings with JT. So yeah, he was a main teacher
that was
of mine.
The tune Dry Stone? Is that the
exactly
John Taylor tune? Yeah.
Exactly. And I also studied a lot with James Madron, who's I would say my favorite setting that he's in is with the group called Enemy with Kit Downs. And he showed me a lot about just polyrhythmic playing and how to just understand more about rhythm. And he helped my sound a lot acoustically and stuff. So they were the main two teachers. I mean, I also got to study a lot with visiting people that came in to have some time with Dave Holland, rhythm section classes, and Chris Potter. And
oh, wow.
We had a lot of people that came in. That's another reason why I chose to go there, is because they seem to get the best people to always come in and do master classes. So,
and were you gigging a lot while you were in school as well?
Not really. No, I mean, I would say I wasn't really a standard yet. But by the end, yes. By the end of the 4 years, I was sort of going out. I got to go to Europe for the first time with Giraud, the bass player that's on the record.
Okay.
Yeah, he brought me there to do some gigs for the first time. But yeah, that first couple of years, and I'll say also there was the COVID pandemic.
Oh, right.
Too. So I mean, 2 years of my education was totally wiped. And thankfully, it led me to meet Hutch and to study online with him. But that was unfortunate because it would have probably looked a bit different. I probably would have been playing.
Yeah, and I want to get to your studying with Hutch, but before we do that, in researching for this interview, I discovered, the connection with John Taylor and the tune Dry Stone. And, for better or worse, it was really the first time that I had listened to Martin France play seriously, being a drummer in the UK. He's not somebody that gets a lot of attention here in the States. Such an incredible player. And I'm so glad that I learned about him. So I'm curious, what was studying with him like? And what types of things did he like to have you work on, or generally did you get the impression that he liked to focus on?
I mean, a lot of it was hands, a lot of it was technique. Just on a snare drum, we'd get together and just sort of go through stuff with stick control. And there's that book, Wrist Twisters, I think it's called.
Yes, that's a great one.
Buster Bailey, I think you told me about that.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a bunch of sort of French snare drum etudes, like Jacques Delacluze etudes, which were like, I think they were sort of audition pieces for people in France, sort of about 100 years ago. So graduating to get into the orchestras, they had to be able to play all 12 etudes at tempo. And so he would bring in one or two, and we'd sort of just work on them and figure out how best to execute them. He was a real technique fanatic. So a lot of it was that, which was obviously, he had great hands, and obviously, as you I'm sure have now heard on records, a great sound. Also, I'd bring in trios or quartet that I would be playing with to prepare for, end of year recitals and stuff. And he'd have sort of feedback for the things, and similarly also, just feedback for how I could play better with an ensemble too.
You would actually bring in the live people and play?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting. Okay.
we'd play a tune or two, and then he'd play a tune also that, I'd ask him like how he would maybe do it, and
Oh,
that was
interesting.
incredible
Yeah.
too. Because I mean, he has an amazing sense of time and freedom within the music that I think you got to be pretty turned on to play with. I would say like playing. I'd imagine playing with someone like Jack DeJohnette. You got to be pretty turned on to play with that style of drumming, because
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if you're not paying attention, you're quickly flipped. Being with him in a setting like that was I grew a lot with him, I'd say, as a musician and drummer. So
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I just, like I
mm,
said, I'm so inspired after hearing him, and I'm so excited
yeah,
to check him
yeah,
out more. Another thing that I know you've talked about is how your musical relationship with Sean Payne formed at school. Were you
yeah.
the same age or about the same age and kind of at the same level?
Yeah, we've been, I think he's July and I'm August, so we're basically the same
Oh,
age.
okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, we, as I said, we met at the summer school, the NYJC summer
Oh,
school,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
then by
Yeah.
the time we got to school, it was funny because we really didn't get on as people for probably about 6 months. I would say it took us being in class sort of just, I would say it was more from him than me, sort of just little, digs here and there in class and
Oh,
stuff. Just,
interesting.
just difference of backgrounds and character. But after we settled our differences and realized that we were basically both the same person, deep down, and we both were just sort of nerds about music,
Yeah.
that quickly turned into obviously a lifelong partnership as musical colleagues. And basically ever since that, we've always, it's just sort of developed. Every year it's gotten more experienced. And yeah, that couple of years at school, we'd sort of, even just as I was shedding all the time, he was always practicing and always trying to be the best he could be, and still is. And that was one of the most probably advanced musicians that I'd met at that point. He'd had a lot more musical experience than I had, so he was giving me feedback about how I could help him in a musical situation, how I could make him sound better, how he could make me sound better. And we were just working on this duo partnership, playing different tunes. We'd play, tunes by Wynton Marsalis and Bramford Marsalis and Kenny Kirkland and Mulgrew,
Yeah.
and then we take them on gigs and play them, and then we'd also play a lot of standards, and just playing ridiculously fast for a long time and trying to figure out how better to play long, playing a tune for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and then take a break and go back and do it again. It was a big sort of growth period for me. He's a big part of my development, as a friend and mentor at that time.
Yeah. And there are some really nice duo videos that you all have online.
Oh man, yeah, that
Probably,
was in.
probably from your school days. Yeah.
You sent me one, I think, from the pandemic that we did. I think, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. That was during the pandemic. We did like a duo, like house concert or something. But yeah, we'd always. I mean, it was funny because we both have pretty strong, not tastes, but like we at that time we liked a very specific style of music, and we were both trying to build upon a very specific era of music, such as what Wynton and Bramford and Tane and Hutch and all those guys were playing, and
Yeah.
the compositions of that generation. That was a big obsession, I would say, for both of us. And not many other people at that time around us, not really anybody was similarly obsessed. So we were kind of limited in a way to just working on that stuff duo.
Ah.
And eventually over time we'd play with other people and then sort of figure out this, it was always kind of, he was often the leader. It was way before I was leading gigs and stuff, but we tried with different bass players, different piano players, and Freddie Jensen, who's a great bass player that also was on that summer school. He was sort of the third member of the trio that we had at that time. So we'd do gigs as a trio and then gigs with Kit Downs, like I mentioned before, and Dawn would lead a quartet with all of us, and that basically led to his recording, which was all his compositions. It was sort of a very, very good sort of 4 years of growth as a duo, and it led to him developing the quartet that's on his record with Reiner and also Matthias Pichler, the bass player on Sean's record. Yeah, it stemmed from duo. So
Yeah, and that's fun. That's fun to hear about too, because I now remember that there is an incredible duet track on your album.
Mm.
I think the tune is called
Yeah, exactly.
Afterthought.
Yeah,
And
as it was,
was it
named.
an afterthought or?
It was basically we were warming up to record Namesake, which is obviously the tune that starts the
Yeah, yeah,
record
yeah.
off, which is written by Sean. And we were just warming up duo. We were just playing, getting the levels right in the headphones. And Hutch stops us. He's like, yo, stop, stop, stop. Beep. Red light. And then he's like, go. And so we just play. And then we just played for a minute or two. And I was like, oh, there we go. We've got like an interlude. And it ended up, the ending of it is so candid that it kind of closes off the record really nicely. And I'm really happy that we got that, because it's been a very long period of growing that duo hookup, I'd say. So.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, cool. Oh, one other thing I forgot to ask about with regard to the album that I think will lead into another topic is the tune Phantom of the Bopra. And you have a drum solo that fades out.
Yeah.
At the end. And I'm curious if that fade out was intentional or if you just ended up going on too long and it ended up needing to be faded out, or how a decision like that ends up getting made, because it's very effective. It's really interesting to hear, and the fade out, it leaves me wanting more as the listener, but also it's kind of fun to imagine kind of where it might have gone.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was actually it was Hutch's suggestion. So we tried a couple of different ways of approaching that tune. I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's like written kind of, there's two separate lines. There's the bass line and then there's the hits, and it was originally trio. I mean, I don't know if it was originally recorded trio, but there's recordings with Begonzi and other horn players over the years. But it was written for Joe Henderson, the Phantom. That was a nickname. Fred Hirsch wrote it for him, but it was the best recordings to me were the trio versions with when the sheet waits on, and I didn't know that I wanted a trio song on the record until Hutch says, when it wasn't really working with the horns, can we try it trio? And we just did a take, and it was natural. It just flew straight off and onto the mic. So we did a take immediately trio. At the end, he's like, right, instead of head out, I just loop in that vamp, so Reiner and Giro, they kept that vamp going. But I think it's actually, everything was basically within the first take or two. And this was on the fly. We just sort of overdubbed drop in just before that. And they just started looping it, and we gave it a try and figured out that it worked. And then again, just record, go. And I just played over it a couple of times. And I always wanted to have like a modern trio tune. I like, on like milestones, there's like Billy Boy, for example. Yeah. It's like, it's cool to have like a quintet record and there's like a break for the horn players. Almost like on a gig, you want to give them a break so that they can breathe for a sec.
Sure.
I liked it came out that way. It sort of felt natural, even though it was totally not planned. And much like one of my favorite solos, which is Jack DeJohnette on Slings and Arrows with Michael Brecker.
Oh yeah,
it fades. It fades just as the good shit that he's about to play is happening, and I'm like, oh, I wish, yeah, like you say, I wish it kept going. So yeah, there's like little subtle nods to everything that's been formative for me all throughout the record, and that was one. It faded out instead of we did play for longer.
Yeah.
But I liked it just sort of fading out and then leading into the ballad, essentially. So,
and since you just mentioned the tune Slings and Arrows, I'm reminded that that's a tune that you spent a lot of time on as far as transcribing. And I know transcription is a big part of your process. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit with regard to your method. Do you try to learn by ear before writing down, or vice versa? Do you try to play things exactly as, in this case, Jack did, or are you trying to put your own twist on it? Talk about your process with transcription and how you make it effective in terms of getting stuff into your playing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think now we've sadly got less access to the masters. We can't go and see them play. I mean, back in the day, you could go and see Philly Joe, you could go and see Jimmy Cobb, you could see all of these guys play and figure out what they were playing. So I've talked a lot to K-Wash about that. He'd just go and watch them and figure out what they were playing, but I can't do that. There's some videos, but it's not really the same. So the way for me to have learnt the language, especially, is I couldn't even see live jazz music where I was growing up. That was kind of, for me, the only way to learn was to copy what was on the record. So I would say it's a 50-50 split of learning by ear or writing down. So all along, whether that's been solos, like I remember writing out the Vinnie Colaiuta solo with Herbie on Actual Proof, which is just totally mind melting.
Yeah.
And that was one that took me a really, really long time to figure out. And even if I'm not going to play nested tuplets on 7/4, like, I know what it sounds like because I've heard it now.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a certain thing with transcription which you're only as good as what you can hear. I think a large part of it for me was figuring out and expanding my ears to hear more possibilities and to connect the dots with, okay, so that sticking may be this because it sounds like this, or it flows over the drums like this. So I'd say copying the sound of it for me, learning by ear. So I've done equal amounts of things, like a lot of the solos that are from the bebop, I'd say, lineage, you know, Max Roach and Billy Joe and stuff. I did a lot of those by ear and memorized them. And that takes a lot more time because you memorizing it whilst also learning it by ear and trying to figure it out. Whereas if I'm writing it down, I can more or less hear like 8 bars and then just write it out, you know? So I can, that's developed over a long time, of course. But when you're writing it out, you can just play, okay, that's what it is. Right, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Slings and Arrows was one of the ones I wrote out. I wrote out the whole song. Took me a very long time. And I figured out everything that he was playing, comping, all of the solo at the end. And, you know, I transcribed the whole of Nefertiti, the whole record, and, you know, things like One Finger Snap and different passages of Elvin comping on things. And I'd say a lot of comping stuff I've figured out by writing it out a lot of times. But then on the flip side, there's things like Live at the Lighthouse with Lewis Hayes on drums.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of that, like, I just know the fill-ins, you know, because I've heard it so many times.
Sure.
And I don't really need to write that out. And then things like Blues Number 2 was a very influential thing. And that was like an outtake on Someday My Prince Will Come.
Oh,
where
right,
Philly
right.
Joe comes and sits in on Jimmy Cobb's drums and they just play no blues. That was one of the ones that Hutch told me to check out. And so I learned the whole song, you know, all whatever 7 minutes of it, just chorus by chorus. Each day I'd come in and do a chorus by ear, and gradually I got through the whole song. And now if I've got to get reacquainted with the drums, so that's one of the formative things that always gets me back to square one. You know, gets my hands going, gets my feel back together. Like, I'd say transcription often is to acquire a certain piece of information. So I don't really transcribe as a chore. If something doesn't really spark my ear or spark my creativity, I'm not really provoked to want to transcribe it.
Yeah. So I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but I'm curious that Slings and Arrows transcription, his playing is so dense on that.
Man.
So when you did transcribe it, did you end up then also learning it and playing back and playing along with it with a goal of playing exactly what he played? Or was it more about catching the spirit of it and picking up ideas that you liked here and there?
Hundreds and thousands of times playing along to it, and, you know, figuring out what he ate for breakfast that day that led him to play that thing. You know, I'd say that's a large part of it, is to get inside the player's mind to figure out why they play the thing. What led them to play it? Was it responding to something, or was it them leading the conversation? Why was it on the tom, or why was it on the snare, or, you know, things like that. You always find new stuff within it too. You always find new information and little sort of pieces of gold within it. So I'd spend a very, very long time playing along to it, just over and over and over and over and over again. And gradually that language becomes a part of you. And then there would also be a conscious thing, which is, there's a phrase that I really like. And we talked a little bit about this, of taking a phrase and then reorchestrating it from your own perspective. So I'd take phrases, you know, whether it's Max or Philly or whoever, I'd take simple phrases. And this was a big part of what Hutch helped me with, was taking a phrase and flipping it. Try and do it with your hands crossed over. Try and do with all the right hands on the feet, and, you know, stuff like that, to try and keep the phrase and keep the feeling of it, but change the sound and freshen it up a bit for what we might now play in this day and age,
Yeah.
And that's not to say I didn't spend a lot of time. I mean, I've played all of those solos, Big Sid and Blues Walk and all of those sort of Philly solos that, I've either heard or written out. All of them I've played a shit ton of times. I've played them so many times that I know them so well as that sound, but then I've also taken them and tried to flip every phrase every which way to try and freshen them up to come up with new modern information from it.
Is there a transcription that is maybe the most special to you in that it's really informed your playing or approach to playing in a way that others haven't?
I don't know if I can answer that.
Okay, that's fair.
I would say the title track of Nefertiti, actually, for conceptualizing, trying to take the drums further, trying to move the language further, that does exactly everything that over time I want to do. And to know that he was like, 22 or something when he played it is just insanity,
Yeah.
I probably have played along to that more than anything else. But actually for developing, I'd say my own language, I would say some in between Max and Philly. But I'd say that the Nefertiti thing really conceptualized the culmination of Blakey, Philly, Max, Elvin, all of that stuff in one place. Even though it may not sound like that to people, to me, I hear everything that's in there. So...
Okay, I don't want to gloss over the fact that you studied with Hutch and you did a lot of that during school and during pandemic times. Can you talk about some of the stuff that you worked on with him that was really helpful or surprising to you?
The first thing very much was figuring out my ride cymbal, getting my ride cymbal to be the center of my playing. Because I'd say, sadly, in Europe, there's a pretty distinct lack of prioritizing the ride cymbal within your development as a drummer. Just from my own personal experience, nobody had ever flagged it as being a problem. And within the first 20 seconds that I played for Hutch, he's like, yeah, your ride cymbal sounds like beep. You need to fix that. So, that was immediately a thing. Even though I thought coordinationally and everything, I was together, going straight away in with, yeah, you need to really spend 10,000 hours on that for it to be the center of the universe, because that's what drives the band. That's what everybody plays off. That's what people hear when they hear a record. It's like, if that's not there and it's not consistent, you're nothing, kind of. It's like, that's gotta be a strong thing. At least to me, that was how I took it at that point. So I really took that very literally, went back, took his method of walk the dog, and sort of at the time when the whole world was stood still, I had the time to play the ride cymbal for 2 or 3 hours a day without doing anything else. And that's what I would do. I just play walk the dog at every which tempo, every single tempo through the whole spectrum, and just play one tempo for half an hour. And every day for about a month, 2 months, 3 months, I would gradually see an improvement. And within 1 month between the first lesson and the second lesson, he was like, oh, okay. I think he kind of quickly got the idea that I'm someone that's not going to stop until I've really, really worked on it.
Yeah.
So I came back to him the second time and he saw very large growth within just a month, because I'd spent, you can probably do the maths of how many hours that is if I'm spending 2 hours, 3 hours just on that a day.
Yeah.
Per his advice of how he worked on it. Secondly, how to really work on the Jim Chapin book, how to really get your coordination together. Even though my dad had given me that book when I was young and taught me his method of working on it, Hutch had a whole different conception of it, which he'd learnt from people like Marvin Smitty Smith and K-Wash and, Lewis Nash, they'd all shown him different things on that book that he then passed to me. And that later I would then go on work on with K-Wash, so it's kind of cool the way that it all comes full circle. But that was a very, very formative thing with him, was really getting my coordination, even basically just to the point where the ride cymbal never breaks. That's what we want with the ride cymbal, is it needs to never break. You need to be able to cook with your left hand and the ride cymbal is still playing,
Yeah.
He had all of these just crazy mind-bending exercises where your feet are doing this and your feet are in 5 and your hands are doing the exercise and triplets all around the drums. And it was a very, very important lesson, that first one. And as we went on, like I say, it kind of became more of a exchange of ideas where we would just be, I'd show up to the lesson, he'd give me a sticking, and then we'd spend half an hour coming up with phrases off a 5-stroke roll or a triplet or a flam or paradiddle, you know? So he's got this concept called the butterfly that he learnt from Justin DeChocho, who was his teacher. It's basically about seeing the drums in a non-conventional way of just snare drum, high tom, floor tom as a way of getting around the drums. You know, you could do left hand coming up the drums from the floor tom, or you could lead from the ride cymbal with your left hand on the floor tom and then come to the snare and your hands are crossed. And to be able to play all the rudiments in this way and then going horizontally, so your left hand's going from the hi-hat to the snare to the floor tom, and your right hand's going from the cymbal to the tom to the left hand cymbal.
Yeah.
You know, so your hands are going every which way, and to try and be able to come up with phrases that sound, when you close your eyes, they sound like conventional phrases, but then when you open your eyes, how the hell did you play that, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's Hutch to me. You know, you hear this language that's got the phrasing of Philly or Roy Haynes, and it's through his butterfly effect. You know, it's insane what he can come out with just with three rudiments strung together, you know? And then largely, actually, the most I learned was just about asking him about what it was like to play with Betty Carter, play with Ray Brown, play with Joe Henderson.
Oh, yeah.
The sort of game-changing bands that he was a part of, and what it was like to be touring at 16 years old with Red Rodney. You know, it's like all of these things. He's lived such an incredible life and had such an incredible career that's influenced so many of us as drummers. So it was as much about the actual, just the drums, getting better at playing the drums, as it was about what has led him to play that so well. And there was something that he said to me very early on, because I was obsessed at this point with Philly and Max and Roy Haynes and Blakey and stuff. And he said the first time that he went to play with the late, great Betty Carter, he went in and he was playing all of his slick Philly shit. And she says, stop. I played with Max. I played with Philly. I played with Blakey, and you're not them. You're Greg Hutchinson.
Oh, wow.
And so within the click of a finger, he had to reinvent his whole thing as the story went. And that kind of got me thinking, is like, yeah, why are we obsessed with showing that we know the language? Like, we should be trying to recreate it. We should be trying to recreate the language and coming up with, you know, because we're born innately with creativity, because we all have our own fingerprint, and yet we're obsessed with playing the language and showing that we know it. But for what? It's already been played, you know?
Yeah.
Even when, like, I sometimes have to stop myself, because I was in a Tane phase for a long time, and I was quoting Tane licks all the time. This is, you know,
Sure.
it's part of it. You know, it's part of it. I do it on the record, and I don't care. I'm proud of it. But it's like, you know, Tony never sounded on record like Philly or Max or Roy. I mean, in a literal sense, he wasn't playing the same notes in the same order.
Right.
And yet sometimes we as drummers play the licks. You know, we're not really playing and improvising truly, we're just referencing. So he really helped me to get out of that mindset of showing that I've done my homework. And that was a lesson that gradually over the couple of years that we, you know, and still to this day, you know, it's grown over time, that he's really helped me to find the foundation of my own identity on the instrument. And I'm so grateful for that. So,
and you've studied with other pretty famous teachers too, or masters, I should say, you know, Marcus Gilmore, Tyshawn, K-Wash, Smitty.
yeah.
So I'm wondering if we can just go down the line. I've got to hear a little bit about each one of those. So let's just start with Marcus.
I managed to catch him at a time when it was the pandemic. He was home, you know, so he was advertising that he would do a teaching day here and there, or a couple of slots for lessons would open up. And, you know, I was home. I wasn't able to do classes really in the formal sense at school, because I was at my parents' house. So I hit him up and I said, you know, can I do 3 or 4 lessons with you? And he's an interesting guy because he's such a natural born genius. Like, I mean, you know, he's the grandson of one of the godfathers of modern drumming. You know, his actual biological grandfather is Roy Haynes. And it's like, I found it kind of hard, because I think how he plays, whereas for me, I've had to figure out in a very literal drawing board, notepad and pen, practice room way. I think a lot of what he plays is because he's had the access to be able to hear Roy Haynes and Elvin, and be able to actually sit down and watch these people at an age where you're not thinking 5-stroke roll, paradiddle, da-da-da-da-da. You're just watching it and hearing the sound of it.
And not only watching him play, but sort of, as you alluded to before, like literally seeing what Roy Haynes ate for breakfast,
having coffee,
ate for dinner,
exactly.
lived his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of found it hard to get the information that I wanted from it, but that's not to say it wasn't beneficial, because what I later found was that he was obviously a wealth of information with what records to check out and why. So after the first lesson, I sort of had to figure out, how can I get what I want from this? Because I tried to ask some literal things, and his answer was profound. It was, well, are you doing what you want to? Does it sound how you want it to? Is it achieving what you want it to? Well, okay, cool. It wasn't what it wasn't what I was wanting from it. But then when we ended up talking about Milford Graves and Brice Wassi, Cameroonian percussionist that I later met in Paris, and then all of the drummers from the lineage, Alvin, Roy, Tony, and then hip hop drumming, Tribe Called Quest, Slum Village, why those things are connected to the lineage of jazz music. Like, that was where the sort of gold was with that. And that's what the lessons were. So we talk a lot about Milford Graves, Grand Unification, and Stories, 2 great solo recordings that he did. And then some Cameroonian rhythms. Like, he showed me this book of Brice Wassi, where it's a lot of rhythms from Cameroon. And I kind of got hooked on that. It led me down a very specific path. So that was great. The other ones you mentioned, Tyshawn, Sorry, I met through Hutch. Actually, Hutch was a connector for a lot of these people.
Yeah, sure.
Like I said earlier, he basically said on Instagram Live every week after our lessons, check this guy out. And so I was getting messages from Tyshawn and Jonathan Blake and Rodney Green and all my heroes. They were all sort of messaging me and saying, yeah, Hutch told me to put a hand on your shoulder and offer some words or whatever. So
amazing.
I got acquainted with Tyshawn, and we later became very close friends. And I haven't formally studied with him, but we've sat down in the back room of the drum shop and sat down and had lunch. And I've asked him, I've came with a notepad and pen full of questions, and he's answered them to me. And he is very connected to the style of Jack DeJohnette, both of our favorite drummer, I would say. And yeah, he's helped me a lot with developing my sound and rhythmic approach on the drums, as well as things such as memorizing music at a blink of an eye. Like, he's got a very amazing memory in the way that he can see a score and it's locked, So I've developed my way of being able to learn. If someone shows me a chart with a bunch of different stuff on it, I pretty much got it in my sort of Apple Vision up here floating in front of me when I'm playing it. Because if there's a gust of wind and you're in an outdoor festival and your music goes away, you're screwed. So he helped me with trying to get my memory together and being able to work on orchestration, and similarly to Marcus, giving me a lot of records that I was not hip to. And, very obscure stuff, as well as classical stuff like Stockhausen and Charles Wernan, percussion symphonies. And he's such a genius. And I wouldn't use that word about many people, but he is,
Yeah.
He really is. And I'm grateful, because when I moved to New York, actually, he was selling a Sona drum set that was at Good Hands at the drum shop. And I just signed with Sona, but they told me it was going to be the best part of 10 months to receive the set that I wanted, because I wanted a custom set.
Sure.
And I told Tyshawn that, and he was like, "Oh, there's a set down here. Just take those." So the set of drums that I've been playing, like, he's been watching out for me from day one, and I'm very grateful, because it's not often that someone that grew up in the countryside in the UK can get the guidance from these people, and I don't know, have them watching out for you in the way that they have for me. So yeah, he's definitely been very influential and a very sort of guiding figure in my development. And in New York, he's a friend,
Oh, that's so cool. How about Kate Wash?
I went through to him after I got to New York through Hutch's guidance, and just Will Coxon and Chapin, and then history lesson. It was
right. Yeah, he's an encyclopedia of all things jazz, and it's incredible to
the jazz maniac.
To him. The jazz maniac. That's it.
As he is rightly known.
Yes.
So he really helped me go back to my fundamentals on the snare drum, even though, he kind of said I didn't really need it. Like, I knew that what I needed from him was the history lesson more than the technique and the Chapin stuff. So, when I went there and he had me play Rolling in Rhythm and Paradiddle Johnny and Rhythmania and all this stuff, not knowing that my dad had given me the book a long time ago. So I had it memorized. So I was playing it and the book wasn't even open. So he's like, oh, okay, well, why do you need me? You know, and he's so humble. He doesn't accept that he's a genius. It's crazy to me because he is. And he's such a, like you say, an encyclopedia. So after that, he similarly pointed me in the direction of the right recordings, and fortunate to call him a friend and mentor.
And what about Smitty? I don't think I've really ever heard much about what he's like as a teacher.
That's someone that, again, similarly to Tane, is someone that I greatly look up to as having taken the language of, you know, for example, you know, the stuff that Tony Williams was playing in the 80s and 90s. He's taken it further sonically. So I was just in LA in the beginning of the year for the NAMM show, and I'd known him for a number of years. Tane had introduced me to him, and I never knew if he liked me. I mean, he's of a certain generation that, you know, you need to approach with respect. Hello, sir, Mr. Smith, da 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 da.
Yeah.
So I went to him, and it was just one lesson, but, you know, I sat there with him for 2 or 3 hours, and he showed me his whole pad workout. And inside, I was sort of like, oh, I really hope this isn't the whole lesson, because again, I'd had a lot of time on the snare drum with different teachers. I was really hoping that was not what I was gonna leave with, but thankfully it wasn't. He sat me down on the drums and had me play a bit and put on some tracks and play along on the metronome. And once he saw that I was proficient on the instrument, we just sort of started sharing ideas back and forth. And I'd ask him about what was it like playing with all of the people he's played with, Steve Coleman, or, you know, Joe Henderson and Benny Golson and Ron Carter and Herbie, like all the people that he's played with. What was it like being on the Tonight Show, you know?
Oh, well, I forgot about that. Yeah.
All of these things that he is like one of a very small percentage of people that have done that. So yeah, I'm still not sure if he likes me, but it was a great lesson.
I'm sure.
And he was very, very kind. And yeah, we then went down to the NAMM show the day after, and I got to meet Dennis Chambers, and
cool.
that was pretty crazy. So
did you ever study with Tane?
No. But I've obviously been a fly on his shoulder at as many gigs as I could be, just to try and absorb as much of that information as possible.
Sure.
And I think I first met him actually in Paris while I was living there, and he's been friendly to me all along. And yeah, also just one of my biggest inspirations and original voices on the drums. You know, I've gone to as many gigs as I can of him and hung out, having whiskey after the gig, you know, all that kind of stuff, just till whatever time in the morning, and just being a pain in the behind, you know, just asking him every single annoying question I can. So I would call him a mentor in that sense, but I haven't sat down and said, can I have 1 hour lesson, please, sir?
Sure.
You know, I've learned more from him, but in an informal way, which I think is the best way to learn sometimes.
Yeah, I gotcha. Let's shift gears just a little bit. I'm curious about what made you decide to move to New York and how it's been going.
It's been mixed. It's a tough place to live as a non-American. It's a tough place to move to as a non-American.
Sure.
But yeah, it came through Ralph Kemper, who I mentioned earlier, who was the owner of that studio. I did a couple of recordings at his studio. And he put me in touch with a singer who needed a drummer very late in the day. And so they helped me getting the visa for a tour that they had coming up about 3 weeks later. So
cool.
I sort of upped and left Paris, moved back home for a couple of weeks, did my visa interview and everything. And the visa came back and it was good until 2026. So I decided I would follow my path. I'd go out there and try and catch the end of the tour. But I was here with 3 years to, and yeah, like I say, all these mentors I've been able to spend time with here. I've been able to play a lot of great music, record a lot of great music. And also I came here really to get better at the drums. I didn't really come here to do the wine bar gigs. You know, I didn't really want to do that stuff, so to speak, you know, because I'd already done that in London and Paris and stuff. But I wanted to come here really kind of just to get better at my instrument and be around all of these drummers and get to meet a lot of the great musicians, some of which sadly have passed on now. But yeah, I'd say for me, everybody says it, New York's not really what it once was in many ways. It's great in so many ways, but for me, it was kind of eye-opening because it was really a lot further from what was expected for me. So I came here and I kind of quickly realized it was not going to be the same pathway for me as many others, going to school, going to Smalls every night, doing 10 gigs a week to try and make rent and all of this stuff. I wanted to come here, and I would still be going back to Europe every month or every 2 months to play with people and record and stuff. And that was kind of that was a godsend in a way, because that helped me to live here, kind of. It is what it is. But I mean, also with the visa, I was able to play. So I've been able to play a lot of really good gigs and meet a lot of really good musicians that now are lifelong colleagues. So largely positive, but
And we touched on this before, but I mean, it sounds like you've done an incredible amount of practicing in the last few years too.
That's really what it's been. It's been study. It was for me to fill in a lot of the gaps with the history, fill in a lot of gaps in my playing. I've had a lot of time to practice. I've got a spot that's about 10 minutes away from my house that's got my drums and all my cymbals and everything, so I can go there every day.
Oh, nice.
When I moved here, I didn't have a place to practice, and I was I was basically subleasing a practice space from someone. So I'd go to a gig, I'd go and see the 6 o'clock set at Smalls, and I'd see, I don't know, Jonathan Blake playing with someone, and then I'd go to the Vanguard and I'd hear Marcus at 8 o'clock, and then I'd go to Smoke for the 9:30 set Uptown, and then I would go and practice from midnight until 7 a.m. and I would just take a flask of coffee and I'd come out when the sun rose and I'd sleep and do a session at 4 and then go to Smalls or whatever. It was the first few months here. I would practice the entire night. I mean, I'd come and I'd walk home at 7 and I'd call my mum. She'd be having her lunch break at work.
Sure.
Back in the UK, and I'd be coming home for bedtime. And eventually I ironed out that routine and shifted it a bit earlier in the day and whatever. But yeah, having a lot of time to myself to practice has been great. I've worked on a lot of stuff, and I'd say I've improved probably more in this 3 years than ever before, I'd say.
What do you feel like the overarching focus has been for the last couple of years?
I mean, largely it's about finding who I am on the instrument, trying to find the culmination of all of this language and all of this information and all of these lessons that I've had from people, finding what that results in. And I'm still not sure if I know, but I'm definitely further along with it, because now I definitely have a stronger idea of what I don't want to play like, so I've figured out a lot of refinement, and I've gotten a lot better at a lot of things. I've gotten a lot stronger at being a sideman. I've gotten a lot better at learning music quickly, learning a hell of a lot of tunes, for gigs. Like, I've found that people here, sometimes you don't get a set list, you don't get tunes. So just knowing enough tunes to get by on gigs. And if someone sends you a bunch of written music the morning of a gig and you don't have any time to learn it, like learning tunes on the subway to the gig without any ability to hear them, stuff like that, And I use it as a challenge. Like I said, with the Tyshawn thing, I try and never use music. Like, someone send you 10 tunes that they've written, and some of them are 3 or 4 pages with a couple of time signatures and 2 different blowing forms. And I basically never use music. I'll just try and show up and just know it as best I can, even if I've only had 2 hours or 3 hours to prepare. Whatever that means with 2 or 3 hours. But I'd say for the large part, it's just been about becoming more proficient on the instrument and just sort of maturing as a musician through playing with singers. Like in the UK, I didn't do so many singer gigs. And then I came here and I was playing all of these tunes that only singers call and tempos that only singers want to play.
Sure.
Having to play 2 sets just on brushes, basically, because that's how singers like a lot of tunes to be, because they need to shine at the front of the stage. And if you're blowing all your jack shit on the back of the stage, you get fired. So thankfully I never did that, but that's what I would imagine would happen if I did. But you've got to know how to serve the music ultimately. So yeah, it's just been a lot of learning, I think, ultimately. And now I'm kind of ready for a break from the place and get back to Europe and just play, really. So,
okay. Yeah, you're moving back pretty soon, it sounds like.
2 weeks from today, May 15th, I'll be making my journey. So I'll be going back to Europe, and hopefully that's the right move. But yeah, for me, it's like I said before, it's whatever people's political orientation or following. It's a hard place as an immigrant right now,
Yeah.
with everything going on. And I mean, a visa here is extortionately expensive. And I would rather if I had that money, I would rather put it into a creative project. I'm going to give it a break, and New York's always going to be here. It's not like
Oh,
it's
sure.
on a tectonic plate like LA is, where it, actually might one day go somewhere. I don't think it's going anywhere, and there's obviously so many musicians that come and go. They get what they need, and they go elsewhere, and they take off. So
Sure.
I'm hoping it's the right move, and hoping it goes smoothly and
Well,
stuff.
you have so many connections in Europe and the UK that you'll no doubt be very busy, and I'll look forward to following your career.
Thank you, man.
Before we start to wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about gear, because I know that you are a big gear fanatic, like I am.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about drums and cymbals.
Drum nerds unite.
Exactly. You mentioned your association with Sonar, which is amazing.
Thank you.
And I know that you're a Zildjian artist. There's that incredible video of you playing the new Karope series. I'll make sure to put a link to that in the show notes. I'm curious if you can talk briefly about how the Sonar and Zildjian thing came up, and then just as a fellow drum nerd, I'm curious what sticks you use and that kind of stuff. But you don't have to go into tedious detail.
Well, as I've mentioned a few times through this, my big inspirations are Jeff Tain Watts and Jack DeJohnette. So ever since a very early age, I've been seeing Sonar drums. I've been seeing the photos of Tain playing them. There's a documentary of Branford Marsalis, which actually I would be keen for you to link, actually, called The Music Tells You. And there's a load of footage of the Branford Trio touring, back in the 90s, and it surrounds.
Is that the one where there's that famous clip of them playing in like a classroom or something?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. That was so everybody's probably seen that clip, but I don't think people are hip to where that clip came from. So yeah, there's this documentary is where that's from, and yeah, that one. I think I saw that later on, but point still stands is that there's the beautiful Sonar drums, and they sound nothing like anything else. They resonate more than just about anything. And just when you hear Sonar, they just have such a sound that all along has encapsulated, to me, uniqueness, identity. It's just like, really, you see drummers that play Sonar, even though that may seem like fewer drummers from the jazz lineage. But you hear Jack, you hear Tain, you hear Adam Nussbaum, you hear Marcus, and those just being a few names, but you hear Sonar and you know that sound, and right away And so I've always been a drum nerd. I've had Gretsch drums, I've played Pearl, I've had Yamaha, all of the drums around the clubs, Yamaha, Tama, Craviotto, Mapex, just about everything I've played, and every time there's a Sonar drum set, it's just like, these just feel like nothing else. And to me, I care about resonance, and I care about that full sound of the drums. I recently got to go to the Sonar factory for the first time. I was in Germany, and the factory is in the middle of nowhere. So I drove with a friend of mine out there, and I got to meet a lot of the guys there. And what I was amazed by is most of it is like, there's one lady that does the lugs, there's one guy that does the shells, there's one guy doing the marimbas and xylophone notes. It's like, really, it's a small family of craftsmen. Obviously, I've built the relationship over a number of years. I wrote them an email that I wanted to record with them for a couple of projects, including my own record. So I knew what I wanted to document my own sound, and I knew that Sonar was the right place. But it wasn't until the middle of last year that we formalized the endorsement and stuff. But yeah, I got to go there, and I got to see the standard of excellence and play a bunch of drums, and I'm awaiting a set that they're making for me next. This fall now, and which is going to be a totally custom set, which I'm very, very excited about.
What shells did you go with?
They're actually, funny enough, the same shells as these drums that I've been playing of the old SQ2s of Taishan's. So it's the SQ2 series, and they're heavy beach shells,
Oh,
much
yeah,
like
yeah.
the old phonic drums. And
Yeah.
I mean, they're heavy drums. They have some weight to them, and if you tune them up high, you can get touch out of them. You don't have to smack them. You can get
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much resonance out of them, and so many colors, and they just always sound like themselves. And
Yeah.
I mean, getting to see them working and innovating, and they're really going for detail and really going for perfection with everything that comes out of their factory. I was sort of assured that I was in the right place. I had a recording in Luxembourg, which is also a place that not many people are familiar with, but
Right. Right.
I asked them if I could use a set for the recording there. And it was in the deep winter. There was snow all over the roads on the way from Germany where the factory is there. And so this guy comes with a huge truck and all the drums brand new heads on everything. They're just in boxes with bubble wrap and plastic and everything. And I got to unwrap a brand new set of drums just for this, just for this, just for this.
Wow.
And I shook the guy's hand, and he hands off the drums, and then he goes on his way on the road back to Germany. And I didn't know this until I just went there, because I thought this gentleman in the offices looked familiar. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh, remind me your name. We shook hands again and met formally. His name's Holger. And he was like, yeah, I'm the idiot that drove the drums to you. And it was sadly, it was a rare occasion where the courier company, I think something like couldn't get there,
Hmm.
because of the snow or something. So he drove that single set to me at that time, unofficially endorsed, but in need of a set for this recording so that I could play them. And he was there bang on time. Like, it's just one of the most incredible things. And that's the treatment, and that's the standard of excellence that they uphold. And so, I mean, you hear it on the drums. They
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
incredible. You have them, as I know you have some old Sona drums too.
I do. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're everybody says it. They're like nothing else. So I'm very proud of that relationship, and I'm hopeful that it's going to be a long time playing
Oh,
Sona.
beautiful,
So
beautiful. What about Zildjian? I'm
yeah,
curious what symbols that you like. I know we were talking before we started recording of a new old
yeah,
symbol that you got, but tell me a
yes.
little bit about how
As of yesterday,
Yeah,
new
exactly.
find. I mean, I've had a lot. I've got a lot of different symbols that I play, and I mean, obviously Zildjian has had a lot of eras. It's had a lot of different symbols over the years come and go. And I would say what I like the most are sort of, more along the K-Con direction.
Mm.
And every time I go up there to Boston, similarly, the treatment is fantastic. A shout out to Joe Tester and Eric Gross, who really they help me to find exactly what I need every time I go there. And I mean, when I first signed with them, with Zildjian, because I was obviously in a tough predicament. I was leaving one cymbal company to go to another, and whilst that's a very tough thing to navigate, also to navigate as a young person, I sort of didn't want to, piss anybody off, so to speak. So I needed to do
Yeah.
it as tastefully as I could, even though it's a difficult thing, because you're an artist and everybody wants you, they all want you to stay put. They want to try and fix things. But at the time, I was sort of set that, Paiste Paiste's on my record. I'm not going to hide that. Paiste's on the record, and I'm very proud of those symbols. They were some of Hutch's old master symbols, and
Mm.
that's where I was at that point, and I believe that it's a development with equipment. Your ears go to different places.
Sure. Sure.
And so my ears were kind of hearing something else. And on my first experience up at Zildjian, I mean, they just helped me find everything that I wanted. And I got to meet Manabu Yamamoto, who has he also makes art symbol
Oh, yeah.
Yamamoto
Yeah.
over in Japan. Some of the most incredible instruments, and he's been working on the Karopes. I mean, one of the things that as an artist I'm very fortunate to receive is, I get to spend some time, and if I'm hearing a certain thing with a symbol that's not quite exactly as I hear it, I can ask Manabu, can you just hammer this a bit? Can you tune it? I mean, I'm like we talked about, I'm a fanatic. I'm a bit of a nerd with sound. I want things to sound I want things to resonate in a certain way, and I don't want to hear certain things. And so Manabu also is a fanatic, an absolute genius with hammering and lathing and
Yeah.
everything. He just knows with 3 cymbal hits, he's changed the sound of a cymbal. It's incredible to work with him. So all of my cymbals, even, I mean, I'm proud to say that you know, K-cons, you know, medium, thin, high, medium, thin, low, the hats, flat ride, you know, then I also play like high definition, the K custom with Terry Lynn Carrington cymbal.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
they're all like slightly different. They're all slightly modified. So they're
Uh-huh.
largely they're largely off the shelf, but just with you know, just a slight bit of a modification to help them fit my hand a bit better, you know,
Uh-huh.
fit
Uh-huh.
what my ears are hearing a little better. So yeah, that's been a largely, you know, positive experience. And I'm honored to, you know, on that first call with Joe, when we were trying to navigate the transition over a couple of months, he sort of told me that they're working on this new Karope line, and that's been incredible. I mean, I got to spend time at the prototype days with, you know, Billy Drummond and Carl Allen and all the artists. You know, they were talking and prototyping the cymbals, and I got to meet a lot of my heroes for the first time.
Oh, how cool.
Seeing them testing stuff, and they had a prototype day at a recording studio, and we all got to do 2 takes of tunes and see how the cymbals sounded on recordings. And yeah, I mean, they asked me to do the video shoot, and I got to go there on the same day as John Riley and Billy Drummond, and it was,
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
it was pretty cool. I mean, I got to sit there and see John Riley talking about them and testing them, and see Billy Drummond do it. And I mean, I had to follow that, which was pretty tricky.
Sure.
It was pretty nerve wracking, but I just sort of had to, you know, took a breath, said I'm there for a reason, and I tried to put down, again, similarly to recording. It's like you're just putting your best foot forward that day.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. So did that video, and I'm thankful that people sort of seem to think I made them sound all right.
Oh, you
And
did. You did. Yeah.
but yeah, most recently I've sort of acquired a few things. Like I'm fortunate to get to spend some time with Bill Stewart, and he let me take a cymbal of his, and I'll prototype that I've played to death
Oh,
over the
wow.
last year or
Very
so.
cool.
That's the main one that I'm playing, and that was a prototype from 2018. I'm not sure if it was a particular model, but it's somewhere between a dry complex and a bounce, and it's got a few things. Like it's got some really unique hand hammering that Paul Francis did while he was still working at Zildjian.
Oh, sure, sure.
And yeah, Bill is also one of the most identifiable sounds, and his cymbal, the dry
Oh,
complex,
yeah.
is one of the best cymbals that I think Zildjian's ever made. And yeah, yesterday I was in the drum shop, and I've been contemplating a dry complex that they've had there for a while, and because I'm moving so soon, I
Right.
decided it was right to grab it because they're so rare now. So yeah, that's gonna be on some recordings coming up, which I'm happy about.
Oh,
And
fantastic. Yeah, I know you
yeah,
sent me I think the video you sent me of that cymbal was from the drum shop, and you were playing it with SD11s, the Vic Firth
yeah,
sticks that
the
Billy
Billy
Drummond
Drummond,
uses. Yeah.
yeah, the Drummond ones, yeah,
But that's not
yeah.
your usual
No,
stick though, is it?
no, it isn't. I like those, funny enough, for testing cymbals because they get a pretty strong,
Yeah.
they get a good stick definition, and I don't think they change the tone of the cymbal too much. You get a pretty true,
Yeah.
true tone out of the
Yep, yep.
cymbal. And I'll test cymbals with a few different sticks, but the main ones that I play, at least right now, because again, as I don't really settle on things for too long.
Sure.
But what I'm into lately for the last 6 months or so have been the Peter Erskine big band sticks.
Oh,
And
okay.
I think they're a bit, I mean, the SD11s are maple. So they're, I
Yeah.
think they have the tendency to be a little on the darker side, but the Hickory Erskine ones, they're a bit more solid. They're a bit heavier, which I
Mm,
like. I get a bit more of a full sound out of the drums and
mm.
bit more out of the cymbals. But yeah, that kind of teardrop acorn tip is more or less the same, and I like those. I've had a phase when I sort of started to hang out with Bill. I started playing the John Rileys. I tried to make
Oh, yeah,
those
yeah, yeah.
work for a long time because that's what I think he likes those. So I've tried those. Spent probably similarly 6 months with those.
Mm.
I've had phases. I played the AJ1s and the AJ2s for a
Yeah.
very long time.
Yep, yep, yep.
That's what's on Sean's album. I really liked those at
Oh,
that
okay.
point.
Okay.
I think that was AJ ones at that point. And yeah, I've spent time with the Hutch stick, the MJC ones.
Oh, right, right, right.
Although I'm worried I almost gave myself tendonitis playing those. They're really heavy.
Oh.
Yeah, there was one gig which I remember vividly. I was like, yeah, I'm never playing these sticks again. It was like a 3-set gig, and
Oh, geez.
the last song was one of those that everybody decides that they want to take a long solo, and they were the only sticks I was playing. And so I was there, and at the end, my arm felt like it was. I mean,
Oh,
it was
yeah.
obviously in the moment, adrenaline kicks in. You're like, yeah, get through it,
Right,
get through
right.
it, get through it. But after, I was like, I could really be making my life easier.
Yeah, yeah,
I like a challenge to an extent,
yeah.
but that was another phase. But yeah, I've kind of spent time. I've got basically every Vic Firth stick. I've really been a nerd and tried
Yeah.
just about everything. Tried playing ST2 Boleros for a long
Yep,
time.
yep, yep, yep.
The Brian Blade and Hutch's new kind of sound that he's been digging. But yeah, it's really just a constant thing. It's like very much what side of the bed you wake up on. It's like,
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
like
Well,
this today, you know?
yeah, well, experimenting with sticks is fun because they're pretty inexpensive and kind of,
Yeah.
even just changing your feel up a little can be inspiring, or change a
Yeah.
direction you go with getting around the kit. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, so I've got a couple of wrap-up questions.
Cool.
The first thing that I'm curious about, since you've spent so much time studying with great drummers and so much time practicing, is there some advice that you would give to young drummers about areas to focus on or to not focus on too much?
I'd say, I mean, listen to as much different stuff as possible. Expand your ears, try and hear different styles of drumming. That's one of the things I'm most thankful that was sort of foundational from my dad. Like I said before, like Brazilian music, gotta know great Brazilian music and how to play samba, bossa, da 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 da. How to play Afro-Cuban styles, how to play salsa, how to play, in different styles of music, how to play backbeat music. Even if you're not so focused on that being your job long term or what you want to make an impact within long term, like just understanding how the drums relate to different things in those styles, it can't be harmful, it can't hurt. So I've always
Yeah.
just tried, even if I'm in a phase of like being obsessive about whatever, Tony Williams or whatever, I'm still sort of going into the practice room and I'll practice sort of different rhythms from Cameroon or Guinea or Senegal or Nigeria or Brazil, different rhythms from around the world. Indian rhythms, fascinating,
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you go back, I mean, you see Blakey and Alvin, Blakey lived in Africa. He moved to Africa. A lot of these rhythms, the drums is a worldwide instrument. It came from Africa, and we as drummers, we need to understand as much as there is about it. So just the process of listening to as much different stuff as possible is, I would say, a beneficial foundation to anybody's playing. So with that, taking those things and putting them onto the drum set is really beneficial. I would say then, things that can never hurt to practice. Developing coordination is a daily thing, like being sure that everything is lining up, making sure that the right symbol is prominent. So, checking out the Jim Chapin book, checking out syncopation, trying to be creative and trying to come up with your own way of approaching those books is, I'd say, pretty foundational to where I'm at now. Even though Hutch, K-Wash, the people that have shown me ways of working on the books, I've then come up with my own ways of approaching them that is a fusion of all of their approaches, because
and helps get you to your sound then too, while
totally,
maintaining the practicing of the fundamentals and the foundational things you have to keep together.
Exactly. So that I would say that's definitely a daily thing, that I'd spend an hour or two if I can afford to every day on just making sure those things, because those things that even if you're not sure if they're improving, everything needs to be coordinated whenever you're playing. Like if it's not, it sounds sloppy. So it needs to be together. And the right cymbal, if you're playing swing or if you're playing backbeat, the hi-hat, making sure stuff is not getting in the way of the driving pulse behind the music. It can never be harmful. So
yeah
I'd say that's something that every single day is a ritual. Really knowing the rudiments, really knowing how to get a good sound out of the snare drum, spending an hour or two each day on the snare drum if you can afford to. And I'm saying all of this knowing that I've had the fortune of having time to do those things. I've had time to work on things that amount of, but if you go back and you read Notes and Tones by Arthur Taylor and you see Tony Williams and Elvin, they both say the same thing. There was periods in both of their lives for 6, 7, 8 years and beyond where every single day they were approaching the drums. They were just developing at the drums. It's important to spend a lot of time practicing, because when you get busy and you get touring, you can't play, you can't practice. You need to have that together. So for me, I'm at the beginning of my career, and whilst I'm busy relative to where I'm at in my life, I still try and make sure that I always have time to play every day, because you look at Tony Williams and the rudimental ritual that Alan Dawson taught him. There's a reason that he practiced it every day. And there's a reason that he practiced the ride cymbal on its own for long periods of time by itself, because those are the things that if you have those together so undeniably that they're always together, even if you've not slept or you're sick or you've got a broken leg or whatever, that's gonna keep you going. That's gonna keep you sort of moving, so to speak.
And what about doing things to make sure that you're keeping your practicing connected to music?
I'd say practicing tunes is something that I practice in a building where there's a lot of drummers, and even though all of those things that I just said, the rudiments thing and the ride cymbal coordination thing, they're kind of ritualistic and kind of meditative things that you have to work on away from music in a way. Like, relating everything that we practice on the drums to music is something that is fundamental. Like, we need to make sure that what we play on the drums relates in a musical setting. So perhaps something that I wish I'd done that I didn't discover until the point that I started playing a lot with more people was, practicing tunes by myself. Practicing how to orchestrate hits, how to set up hits, how to really orchestrate a stop, how to count in a band. You count in a tune and then you play and it's 5 BPM slower. It sounds bad, Practicing counting yourself in and then playing and it sounding right on the money, and if anything, a pinch on top to give people a little kick to make them perk up. Like being able to have these as options, and practicing trading on tunes that don't have conventional forms. Being able to navigate 3-bar phrases, 5-bar phrases, odd time signature bars. Playing on tunes that maybe like I don't know, for an example, Delfeo's Dilemma, and it has a bar of 3 in, and it's a very like unconventional form. Being able to play on tunes with unconventional forms, oftentimes when people only are familiar with standard forms, it catches them out and they lose the form or they get lost or something. And that's something that I would say everybody should be trying to get better at. Being able, because when you then go and play, what is this thing called Love on Green Dolphin Street, whatever, like, name your favorite standard, whatever. Being able to navigate harder tunes than that is only, again, it's not going to hurt. It's only going to help. I would say those sorts of things, personally, things that I work on every day, other than what I've already said and including transcriptions and stuff like that, working on developing my, polyrhythmic approach, because sometimes, horn players, piano players, they want to imply 3s or they want to imply 5s, and you want to be able to not just catch it and play it with them, but to be able to create a counterpoint that makes that sound good. So being able to know how 3s line up with a form over a long period of time, or 5s or 7s, or, implied things that I'll practice in, little rhythmic cells, over a form for a really long period of time. And I'll come up with phrases that are 17 notes and I'll play over Cherokee and I'll see how long it takes to line up.
Interesting.
You can do it mathematically, but you can also lose your mind trying to just figure it out. And once you get better at doing it with smaller cells of rhythms, you start to see connecting dots and it becomes a lot more natural. And all of that to say, all of this stuff is getting you further along to just become proficient, being able to have options to play. And it's like a subconscious thing that happens. If you practice playing implied tempos, the actual tempo gets stronger. you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'll practice polyrhythms and things over songs, and I'm singing the song. You know, I'm singing not necessarily the lyrics, but like the melody at the very least, and then thinking about where the harmony is lining up. You know, and then all these things dictate to me, what the drums should do. You know, the music dictates what the drums should do, and it's funny, every time I come into my practice space and there's a lot of drummers practicing, I almost never hear people just practicing tunes. It's always just like exercises and drum specific things.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not to say that they never practice tunes, but I'd say there is a strong lack of things, drummers that sit down and play a tune imagining, okay, right, Cannonball is soloing right now. What does that sound like? And how do I accompany that? Okay, Kenny Kirkland is playing. How does that sound? Can I imagine that really to the nth degree and create an accompaniment in the style of, what does it sound like if Elvin played on this tune? What does it sound like if Tony played on this tune? Like doing not impersonations, but my personal thing of, how do I hear Elvin playing One Finger Snap? That's an interesting one. Like, there's a tune
Oh.
that you hear Tony on, but what would it sound like if Elvin played it?
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of this comes from curiosity, but a lot of it is just stuff that I feel rounds out. It's as much about creating options as it is about knowing which options don't really work too.
Oh, sure, sure. And what do you do to evaluate yourself and keep yourself honest?
Recording myself. Like I record religiously. I'm not a big fan of the metronome. I'd rather record and know that I speed up or slow down or rush a phrase or drag on a phrase or whatever. Because to me, I've never really found a way for the metronome to feel great. Like it always somewhat feels unnatural to me. Robotic is maybe a better word, I mean, being able to play with the metronome is an essential skill. It goes without saying, but like,
Yeah, yeah.
that to me, like, oftentimes if you put the metronome on 2 and 4, you don't get good time. You just get good at aiming for 2 and 4. Whereas if there's, to me at least, I know plenty of people that use the metronome that have, they sound like they have really good time. But to me, if I take the metronome off and then play, suddenly you speed up, you slow down, you rush triplets, whatever, it's like, it doesn't really get you, to me, it never really clicked for me. No pun intended. I never really found a way that I like to use it. So I always played along to a lot of records, recorded myself, playing along without headphones.
Oh, right. We've talked about that.
Because, I mean, we don't play with AirPods in on a gig. And so you practice with AirPods for the whole day, and then you go to the gig and you play really loud. I mean, you're not really working on sound when your AirPods are flattering your sound to you. I mean, the new AirPods, they flatter the sound. They take off all the harsh frequencies, and then you get scared when you hit the cymbal too hard. It's like, whereas we if you take the headphones off and practice at a really quiet dynamic and record yourself, to me that's the most effective way of transferring what you practice to a live setting. At least for me, this is all my personal experience and my personal
that's an
advice.
amazing tip right there. Yeah.
I think there's a big modern problem of AirPods epidemic. Drummers that they know that the AirPods make them sound really good. And, and you go and they've never really spent the time figuring out the acoustic sound of it. The acoustic sound of the cymbal or the acoustic sound of the snare drum. Like the reason that a lot of these guys, like, I don't know, K-Wash has a fantastic acoustic sound, and it's because he's playing along to speakers and records. He's not,
he's not
sort of shielding himself.
Yeah,
he's not shielding himself from the music. And that's not to say I don't play along to music with like one headphone in or something, but I try to use a speaker.
Yeah.
So that I'm still honing my acoustic sound. That's a very extensive answer, but I hope that's a little insight to what I'm working on. So
yeah, that's fantastic. That touched on so much good stuff.
Cool.
Final question, since you talked so much about listening to music, can you name an album or two that you feel like you've listened to more than any other through your life so far?
I'd be remiss if I didn't say Nefertiti. That's definitely a favorite of mine. This is the hardest question. This is the same feeling I have if someone just told me play a drum solo, because it's like, how the hell do I answer that?
Well,
I mean,
Nefertiti's a good one.
Nefertiti, the whole band, all the tunes, the sound of it, it's just masterpiece. And drumming wise, it's a culmination of all of those people that I've mentioned. This is really hard. I've always tried to prepare for this question if anybody ever asked me, and I could never do it. Right now, an album that has been, I'd say, sort of very influential for me all along has probably been A Love Supreme. I know it's probably not the answer that you're wanting. It's not as niche, perhaps, but between those two records, I'm pretty good. Like if I only had those two CDs,
there, yeah.
If I only had those two CDs, I'm pretty well covered. Top 5 is maybe easier, although it's still not easy. But if you put a gun to my head and say 2 albums, that's what I've got to say.
Okay, perfect. I know, just to mention offhand, I know we've talked a little bit too about how much you like Dark Keys and Bloomington, those Branford albums.
This is why it's so hard. It's because
I know. Okay.
At one point, I would have said those 2 records.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
that's what's really funny. But in today's answer, the records that I'm sort of into probably largely surround that period, like that late sort of 60s Miles group. The sort of towards the end of the second quintet, like Miles in the Sky, Nefertiti, what they were getting to before they disbanded. I'll probably put Miles in the Sky and Nefertiti, because that kind of, both those records, they kind of sum up everything for me.
Okay, perfect.
I haven't answered your question at all now. So
no. This is good. Let's leave it there. We could go on forever talking about this.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, where's the best place for people to keep up with you and follow you? I mean, I try to post on Instagram. I hate it more and more now. AI is taking over it. Yeah.
But in Instagram, I try to post on there. That's probably the best thing. That's just my name with a second I at the end of Kai. So
okay, yeah, I'll link to that in the show notes, of course, and some of the videos we've talked about.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I try to also keep my website as up to date as I can, which is just kaicraig.com. But yeah, I mean, through the website, anybody can hit me up, email me, whatever. I'm always happy to talk about drums with anybody. So
yeah, perfect. Yeah, I know we've been talking drums a lot, so it's a lot of fun. So
yeah, it's a pleasure, man.
Okay, well, with that, let's wrap it up. Good luck with the move back to Europe.
Thank you.
I'll look forward to seeing where you land and how your career blossoms from here. And with that, I'll just thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you for doing a great thing for sort of making information available to us. I love the interviews with Steve Smith, Billy Drummond, Joe Dyson, and Jeremy Dutton. I love them all. George Fludis is an incredible thing that you're doing. So hopefully this is just one in the lineage now. So
thank you so much. That means a lot. All right, man. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Take care.
All right. Bye. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please subscribe on your platform of choice and share it with a friend. You can find the show and a blog at practicingdrummer.com or on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram as Practicing Drummer.